Hotep and Ma'at, bringing you truth. Welcome to everyone who's here for THNK Marketing Misleadership and our panel event. I want to give thanks and praises to all who are here with us. I want to welcome and give thanks to our two panelists. Unfortunately, Sister Zakia is not going to be joining us today. But we do have Brother Omawali and Brother Shakara here with us. So welcome. Thank you
What up? What
for
up?
being here.
Facts, feet, tip.
Yes. So give thanks. Giving thanks to the ancestors who are with us always, and giving thanks and praises to the divine forces that guide this work and that are leading us forward to restore the cosmic order and wisdom to this planet. So I want to give thanks to everybody who's here with us live. If you're catching us back on the playback, feel free to engage via the comments. And I want to go ahead and begin first, if my two panelists can actually introduce themselves. I think that that's the best way to get started. For those of you who are not familiar with our platform, High Tops and Heels is a creative communications agency. It is a legacy of Tehuti Ma'at, revolutionary instrument focused on creating cooperative ventures. So High Tops and Heels is one of those cooperative ventures of Tehuti Ma'at. So please feel free to follow Tehuti Ma'at and all of our other platforms as well. I want to just go ahead and allow that to open the way. So, Brother Omawali, do you want to go ahead and start and introduce yourself? You're no stranger
Yeah, I don't
to
mind.
the platform.
Well, I mean, I wear many different hats, right? So I guess I'll introduce myself first and foremost as a brother. You know what I'm saying? So I appreciate the invite and being here. If you haven't met me before, seen me before on the platform, my name is Brother Omawale. I'm a grassroots organizer. I'm someone who is committed to the elevation, to the liberation, and to the restoration of African people across the globe. I am located in the United States, in the Philadelphia area. Work with a number of organizations, first and foremost with Afrocentricity International, but recently have been doing some work to develop an online institution which will eventually be in the analog world, the African War College. And aside from that, I mean, I do some content creation. I do a little bit of writing. I do a lot of organizing, a lot of connecting. So just, you know, I'm a man of many hats.
Yes.
All right.
So y'all can check out Brother Omawali over on his channel, Omawali Africa. And thank you and welcome to the panel.
Thank you for having
Brother
me.
Shakara.
Yes, ma'am.
Welcome. This is your first time here with us. Welcome. I'm very excited to have you.
It is. It's an honor and a pleasure. I'm sure you're not as excited as I am to be here. I've admired the conversations that you've been having. They're the kind of conversations that I want to have, and you're having it at a level that is so much needed. You know, in this day and time. So I appreciate the invitation, and I'm glad to be here. My name is Tafad Shakara Bandaka, also known as the Shakara. I'm a born and raised member of the Al-Kebula Revivalist movement and the son of the only remaining founding member and spiritual leader of the organization, Brother Leader Mbadaka. That means I'm also a lifelong Garveyite and African spiritualist, which is really what the Al-Kebula Revivalist movement deals with. I'm also a member of the UNIA ACO, the organization founded by the most honorable Marcus Mosiah Garvey, and the Black Star Action Network International, which is affiliated also to the UNIA ACO. I'm a spoken word activist. I'm a writer. I'm an organizer. I'm an educator. In fact, just before this, I was teaching African-centered media studies in the homeschool university that was developed by Queen Thais, that's based in Atlanta, in the USA. So I just want to shout out Queen Thais, you know what I'm saying, and all the young people that are part of the homeschool university. I'm also a SEMA Kemetu yoga or Sematawi instructor. Yeah, my teacher being a brother by the name of Ankh Aku. And so my life is just built around African liberation, African sovereignty, organizing, and developing any number of skills that I can to employ in the service of African people. That is what it's about. That is what, you know, I was born for. That's what I live for. And that is what I'm going to die on. So it's an honor to be here once again, my sister.
Ashe, give thanks. Welcome, welcome. So for those of you who are with us here live, feel free to join the chat. If you're watching from the direct link, you can actually click on the YouTube, and on the YouTube, you can engage in the live chat. So if you want to send any questions, if you want to make any comments, please feel free to do so. Let us know where you're tuning in from if you are joining us live. And to open the way, right, we like to make sure we spiritualize things as we understand that everything that we do is spiritual. It is a ritual. We're living vessels, divine beings. So that goes without saying, but it's very important for us to really open the way and call in that spirit or channel through that spirit in different ways. So what I'm going to share today is actually a spoken word piece. Normally, I actually don't show myself. I'm actually going to allow for that for this one. So I'm just going to move myself up in the... All right.
There you go.
So everything loud and clear? Because, you know, I'm on that West African Wi-Fi.
Oh, you good. You good. You crispy.
You're good.
The way that work. All right.
I know about that West African Wi-Fi. It's special. It's special. It's special.
All right. I say, Wau ancestors. What's the message? What's the message? Do you hear it loud and clear? The ancestors speak and they want you to hear. What's the message? What's the message? Do you hear it loud and clear? Have no fear. Have no fear. Yeah, yeah. What's the message? What's the message? Do you hear it loud and clear? The ancestors speak and they want you to hear. What's the message? What's the message? Do you hear it loud and clear? Crystal clear, crystal clear. What's the message? What's the message? Do you hear it loud and clear? It's right in here. It's right in here. What's the message? What's the message? Do you hear it loud and clear? The ancestors speak and they want you to hear. What's the message? What's the message? Do you hear it loud and clear? Have no fear. Have no fear. Yeah, yeah, yeah. What's the message? What's the message? Do you hear it loud and clear? The ancestors speak and they want you to hear. What's the message? What's the message? Do you hear it loud and clear? Crystal clear, crystal clear. What's the message? What's the message? Do you hear it loud and clear? It's right in here. It's right in here. Knowledge, but you still don't know, 'cause you blow wherever the wind blows. They say my soul's so indigo, but this shit glows every single shade of the rainbow. Wait, pause, no homo, no, and this ain't no homophobe flow. Best believe I bring my octo, bet. Really can't get electricity with 2 plugs and no outlet, bet. That's what you get when you fuck around with set, bet. Can't nation build without Assad and us, bet. Welcome to disorder, no control when you ain't got no borders. Best put them walls up. We in a war, yo. This shit's a war zone. Chasing dough, status quo clones. Putting out nights in a cell, getting back blown. Forced to give another nigga dome. Damn, and this time you grown. Not a boy getting raped in your own home. Same cycle you always known. Telling yourself it's a choice because your manhood's gone. Same strange fruit, same song. Voluntarily castrated. Sexual confusion, sedated. Voluntarily sterilized. Believe in Planned Parenthood lies. No tears in your eyes when your own baby dies. Don't you see? I was there too. I see my reflection in you. Didn't know what else to do. You don't know when you don't know the truth. I said you don't know what you don't know. Play girl in the hood program like a pro, but no remote control when you got no control. But now I know, now I hear, now I see. Now at night I can't sleep. The spirits of would-be children speak to me. They want to be free. They just want a chance to be who they supposed to be. It's bigger than you. It's way bigger than me. What's the message? What's the message? Do you hear it loud and clear? The ancestors speaking and they want you to hear. What's the message? What's the message? Do you hear it loud and clear? Have no fear. Have no fear. What's the message? What's the message? Do you hear it loud and clear? Crystal clear, crystal clear. What's the message? What's the message? Do you hear it loud and clear? It's right in here. It's right in here. Ashe.
Bars. Bars.
Ashe.
Good, thanks. Dua. What's good, family? 52 Lifestyle. All right. So.
What's good, Brother Rob?
I want to go ahead and who's that?
Brother Rob, 52 Lifestyle in the chat.
Okay. Welcome, bro. So what I'm going to do, right, is bring in our great elder, our beloved elder, Mama Marimba Ani, to really start off this conversation on the right track, right? Because we're going to get right to business. We're going to get right to business. So I'm going to go ahead and...
When you say Mama Marimba Ani to me, I'm all the way in. So let's go. I'm ready.
For sure. All right, so we're just gonna allow Mama to open the way for this dialogue, so we really come in on this conversation with the appropriate context. All right.
But a warrior has got to be able to go against what seems to be popular. A warrior has got to up the ante, push the envelope. But in order to do that, we got to be clear about who we are and what it is that we want. And that's what the so-called leaders have not been able to give us. They have no agenda. So that means that you're always compromising because you're always acting out of fear. If leadership really meant something, then you would never act out of fear. That's not to say you don't get afraid sometimes, but fear can't be your agenda. Fear cannot be your agenda. So these leaders are clearly not warriors. And we're talking about warriors. Now, the warrior spirit makes you able to confront whatever needs to be confronted and let the chips fall where they may. And what we've done is to develop a program, a plan, and so forth, which is to say, let us go the way of the least resistance. What's the easiest way? What's the way that's, not going to get people mad at us? That's not a political agenda, and it's not a position of a sovereign people. So I think what I'm really doing is questioning this whole thing of leadership. We've watered down the concept of a leader. We have Uruguayized the concept of a leader. So that now, who we consider to be leaders, it's you got to be a star. And when I say a star, I don't mean a black star. I mean like Hollywood. That's what I mean. You got to be popular, and you got to say the popular things. See, I was trained by none of John Henry Clark, and that gives me the power to say what I think is truth to my people. And that's what he did. Even when it was unpopular among our people, he had to tell the truth. But he said, watch out now. He ain't working for you. Watch out. And people came to him and they warned him. They said, Professor Clark, you really want to say that? You really want to take this position? He said, yeah, because this is the truth. Now, I was trained by it, so I got to do the same thing. Okay? But when we talk about leader now, that's not what we're talking about. We're talking about the person who wants to remain popular. We're talking about the person who may be glib, got away with words, but they really not saying anything. That's what we're talking about. We're talking about the person who develops this personality thing that makes them all about them. We're talking about the person who always wants to stay in the limelight. Person who's ego tripping. So I'm suggesting that we scratch that term, leader. And that what we need are organizers, we need warriors.
That's it. So on that note,
Hold on, we gotta put some
on
respect.
that note,
Put some respect on that.
yeah. Because right after that, she goes, I'm in it to win it. And that's really where my energy is at. Like, I already know what's happening. I already see it. It's crystal clear. But we have to contend with the issue that stands right in front of us, which really is the misleadership, because the season has come and many of us have been prepared to take the lead and to open the way for what's necessary. However, there are the misleaders that are already in position, and I have my own feelings about that, but I want to be able to open the way for the two of you to speak on this issue, because she speaks specifically about, the agenda, like what's going on. What are the issues and what are people being galvanized around?
Yeah.
And even the spoken word piece in terms of the words of the ancestors, right? The overstanding that a lot of these issues that really are fundamental issues that we have to deal with are the issues that have become taboo and that we're not supposed to talk about. We're not supposed to talk about homosexuality. We're not supposed to talk about abortion. Or, there's these very guided narratives that we're being given in terms of what liberation looks like. And especially, in the era with the Black Lives Matter and all these various, so-called movements that are leading people astray. So I was hoping that we could actually begin with the first question. I'm hoping we can have an open dialogue. But there are some particular questions that I really want to make sure we're guided through. And I feel fundamentally we do need to begin with the power of definition, right? As our beloved ancestor, Huey P. Newton, would say, power is the ability to define phenomenon and make it act in a desired manner. And I feel that we have to really define for ourselves what we mean by leader. And as Mama Marimba said, we even want to scrap that word leader. And what we actually need are organizers and warriors. So I have two brilliant organizers who are here on the panel, and I want to know how it is that the two of you define what a leader is for our audience.
Well, Brother Shakarai, you want to start? I can riff off you all night. So let me know how you want to do this.
I believe it was Marcus Garvey who said leadership is blood, pain, and death. It's or words to that effect. A leader is an exemplar. Yeah. A leader is an exemplar. A leader can be a visionary. Yeah. A leader only has relevance within the function of organization. It is organization that produces leadership. Yeah. And I think that's going to be a theme. We have to understand leadership as a function before it is a title. And the title only has relevance within the context of the function it performs as part of a collective. There is no leadership that is an individual by themselves, distinct and separate, disconnected from other people. Yeah. Leadership presupposes organization. All right. And if there is no organization, then there is no leader. There is no leadership. You can have a spokesperson. Yeah. You know what I'm saying? You know, you can have a celebrity. You can have, you know, a high profile individual. But a leader must be operating within the context of organization. And I guess we'll get to this question in a sec. But that also presupposes the fact that there are goals, prescribed goals. There is an agenda at play here that the collective is seeking to achieve, and that goal is going to define the type of organization, and that type of organization is going to define the type of leadership and the role and the function of a leader.
Yeah.
I say well spoken.
Yeah, I definitely have an appreciation for that. The way my brain works, I'm going to try to contrast or contract, because I can go many different branches on this particular discussion. But to make it short and sweet, I'll probably say that a leader is someone who knows the way, and is willing to give of themselves, to be sacrificial, to pour into others, to develop others in order to get us there collectively. So that's what I'll say. So when I say that they know the way, it presumes that they understand what the destination is, right? Because there are various there are various destinations that our people are trying to get to, but not all those destinations get us to freedom, liberation, and or sovereignty or restoration, right? So a leader is someone who is clear in their vision in terms of, what the destination is, how we define liberation, sovereignty, the things that our people need, and is willing to sacrifice themselves. I'm not talking about necessarily martyrdom, but once you step into the role of a leader is first and foremost a servant, right? So you are serving others, you are giving of yourself, you are I know Sister Neff, you talk quite often about kind of like the wolf pack model. Well, if you know anything about the alpha leads from the back, like the weaker, the older, the feeble members of the pack are in the front, and the alpha is in the back. So the leader knows the way, is working to the group there, and is willing to be sacrificial in order to make it happen.
I really appreciate that. Yeah, we talk a lot on the foundation of THNK as an organization is built upon the idea of spiritual warriorship, the cultivating of embodied leadership, and really that exemplar is the fact that the things that are being shared and expressed by the leader are actually embodied by that person. And there is a focus on healing, right? Because we're all in a condition at this point where there's a lot of healing that needs to be done. And that's what we consider to be that embodied leadership, is spiritual warriorship. I do want to shout out some of the family that's in the house. I don't know if this is your family, Omawali.
Yeah. Big up yourself, Brother Wisdom Bars, Brother Jadorian, Sister Felicia Gray. I saw my guy 52 Rob in the building. I see a whole lot of the family in the building pulling up. So shout out to all of
y'all. Brother Kai, got the militia in the house. All right. Well, I'm I think we should also give a bit more of the landscape of. I'm wondering if maybe we can take it even from just get a little more into our story, right? The historical aspect, but then leading into the current. I don't know if one of you wants to take one and the other take the other, and how you want to bounce off of each other. But I do want us to paint a story. Either we can work our way back from where we are right now.
Yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, what mm-hmm.
What was the
So
question?
let's start. Let's start with the current state of leadership in the Black community, right? Those of us of African ascent have we've been on a journey. Some parts of our journey, as far as leadership is concerned, have been strong, but other parts, I would say, where we are right now currently is a state of weakness.
Yeah.
So I'm hoping we could start with where we are now, and then can we work our way backwards and just to some highlighted points of historical context of leadership within our community that's important for us to know as we navigate this conversation of how misleadership is being marketed in our community, because this isn't something that's a new phenomenon.
No doubt. No doubt. So I mean, I guess I'll jump in, Brother Shaka Ra. So I would say the present state of leadership in the Black community, as Brother Shaka Ra said, it's impossible to have a discussion about leaders or leadership that is separate and apart from organization, right? Because organization is what produces and develops and cultivates the leaders that the community needs, right? Because that organization is going to train you, it's going to educate you, it's going to prepare you and give you your mandate that you have to carry out as a leader. However, within the Black community right now, you have to realize that, within the Ma'afa, right, we've been locked in this perpetual state of warfare, this fight for our liberation, and we have to acknowledge the way that our opponent has in some ways been successful at dismantling, disrupting, and destroying our revolutionary instruments to take us to liberation. So in the place of those organizations that were truly revolutionary, that truly knew the way, we've been given alternatives, right? So I don't necessarily see leaders. I see managers, I see overseers, I see people who are strategically put in place, and they adorn the mantle of leadership because they are given the notoriety, they are given the resources, they are given the visibility. So naturally, the flock will look to this individual that's been placed in the front as the leader and someone that should follow. But really, the model of leadership that we presently have, I would argue, is actually a model of misleadership, because the folks who are being placed in the front are strategically being placed there for the purpose of either A, containing the Black community, or B, staving off any revolutionary fervor that might build up within the Black community, right, and would disrupt the present status quo within the system that is dominating us. So that's my long or short way of speaking to the present state of leadership in the Black community.
That's right.
Yeah, to add to that, I think that we have to also bring into this discussion the fact that misleadership is not an accident. Yeah, it's a part of the attack against our movement, right? It was deliberately orchestrated by the system of European imperialism and global white supremacy, as it is referred, in order, to misdirect the intentionality, the righteous intentionality of our people towards sovereignty, right? And so we have a situation in which we talk about the stereotype of corrupt African leaders on the continent. And we often talk about that reality outside of the context of the mass murder of revolutionary leaders. And I'm not just talking about those at the helm, the Osagyefo Kwame Nkrumahs, the Patrice Lumumbas, the Sekou Touré's, the THNK Matis. I'm talking about the masses who we don't know, because leadership is multidimensional. It takes place at different levels.
Yeah.
Yeah. And we often say, we often promote this fallacy that they cut off their head and basically the snake died. Yeah. In relation to our movement. So you kill Malcolm and the OAU, dies. Yeah. Effectively, however, this is not completely true, because there's a level of attack that has to already have taken place for them to get to Omowale Malcolm X, right? For them to get to whoever is at the helm of this. And oftentimes when that person is taken out, there is a whole next program that comes in to affect the organizers of that day and the children of those organizers. Yeah, the Black Panther Party is a good example of this. You attack the generation that is active, but you're also at the same time attacking the children of that generation. That's why people like Tupac Shakur are virtually born under surveillance from the American government, right? So we have to take into consideration all of these dynamics, and the fact that there was a directive, that we know of, that it was directly said we must stop the rise of a Black Messiah who can unify and electrify the Black masses. Yeah. But there's a part, in fact, there's a part of that I think we often forget, that whole COINTELPRO memorandum, which is, other than the fact that he mentions that we don't want them to develop an organization like the Mau Mau, but there's a part of these goals where he says prevent militant Black nationalist groups and leaders from gaining respectability. We must not even gain respectability among the masses of our people by discrediting them to three separate segments of the community. The goal of discrediting Black nationalists must be handled tactically in three ways. You must discredit these groups and individuals to, first, the responsible Negro community. Second, you must discredit to the white community. I'll leave the rest of that. Third, which is important now, these groups must be discredited in the eyes of Negro radicals, the followers of the movement. This last area requires entirely different tactics from the first two. Publicity about violent tendencies and radical statements merely enhances Black nationalists to the last groups. It adds respectability in a different way. A final goal should be to prevent the long-range growth of militant Black organizations, especially among youth. Specific tactics to prevent these groups from converting young people must be developed. And so we're not just talking about physically taking out leaders. We're talking about discrediting even the idea, of Black nationalist leadership to the future generations. And I think that if we look at the characterization of Black nationalist leadership in popular media over the last 3-4 decades, we will see the evidence of that agenda bearing itself to be the case, if that makes sense. And today we have the caricature of the Hotep, which is the latest kind of, buzz term that forwards that kind of thinking, right? So there's a whole lot of dynamics at play here. Ending with the idea of replacing those examples with other examples that speak to ascendancy within the context of the society in which we live, right? So the Black millionaire, the Black sports star, the Black music mogul who turned businessman, the Black president, you know what I'm saying? All of these archetypes are designed specifically to give more viability to other goals and agendas and forms of leadership than those that represent our sovereignty and our nationalist or Pan-Africanist goals.
That represent our best collective interests.
And I think you've done some great work, Brother Omowale, on just kind of painting that picture of just like how the market, it's not just the marketing of the misleadership, it's also the smear campaign on anything that can be possibly, because a lot of the things that we see when we see like the caricature of the Hoteps and different things like that, they're not really like organizers, they're not really doing serious work, but it smears things. And what I've noticed is that it creates this desire for disassociation where people don't even want to associate with certain things. Like, I'm not gonna wear a kufi. I'm not gonna wear unk, right? Just
Yeah.
because of the idea that has been tied around that. So I think that that's very significant for us to lift. It's there's two things happening at the same time. Also, I wanted to lift this comment because the brother says, so why have we not got a spiritual university or college to send our fruit? So I wanted to raise that, yes, Tehuti Ma'a Academy is an online institution for spiritual ascension. We're currently in the process of revamping so we can relaunch things on a different platform. But there's the Kepler Challenge is one of the things that's on there that you can check out. But also, it's also a space, right? It's a cooperative institution. So the goal is to galvanize a lot of the spiritual warriors that are present and have incarnated in order for us to do this particular work. So that is something that is unfolding. I think we have leadership, but I don't think we've got a stable platform. And yeah, I mean, on the basis of both of you raising, the importance of looking at organization, I don't know if you want to speak to just the reality of the state of our organizations in that context. Do we have a stable platform?
No, not at the moment, for sure. There are platforms and organizations that do exist. So I'm always careful, right? Because I don't want to be dismissive of work that is being done out there. Because I have to understand, or we have to understand, that there are people who are laboring in the trenches, who are working with the little resources that they have. And the most important resource that we've ever had is that of our people. And the people who are doing the work are overburdened. Each one person that is working is doing the work of 20 to 50 people. So we have to acknowledge that reality. Because of that situation, it's very difficult for the platforms that we do have to be effective, because in many ways the psychological assault that has been launched against our people has been a bit successful. You know what I mean? Like a lot of us are always clear that we are first and foremost fighting for the minds and fighting for the hearts of our people. But if we're going to say that, we have to acknowledge that the minds and the hearts of our people are already presently won by another reality, right? And once we understand that, the question becomes, en masse, can our people be unplugged from that reality? And if they can't be unplugged en masse, then who are the select few or the critical mass that we need to be trying to reach to bring them into, to the fore so we can get work done? And I think that it requires a reimagining of how we work, because oftentimes a lot of us still have this early 20th century model, which is a flawed model for two reasons, right? The first is that the early 20th century model of Black leadership is built off the Black church. So you have this kind of like, messianic, central figure that everybody wants to be. Everybody is the return of the Christ. I'm the new Moses, I'm the new Garvey, I'm the new Malcolm, right? So that messianic leadership does very much, it infects the minds of a lot of our people, and it makes it very difficult for work to happen in a collaborative manner. So that's the first flaw. But the second is that, when we had mass leadership, the reason why leadership, not leadership, when we had mass movement within the United States, the character of the mass movement was largely able to reach the level of composition that it reached due to the fact that everyone shared the collective goal, or the majority of people shared the collective goal of breaking down the walls of Jim Crow. Now, once the walls of Jim Crow were dismantled and people could effectively integrate, within society and have the laws on their side, you're only left with a very small minority who still want to do work and work towards liberation, towards sovereignty, towards truth, freedom. And a lot of us who are trying to organize today think that we're going to be able to organize on that mass level that we did back then, when the reality is we have to be a lot more agile. We have to be a lot more guerrilla in our thinking, because it's not going to be that huge, demonstration that we saw back then. It's going to be a lot more strategic. It's going to be smaller. It's going to be nimble. And when you see huge demonstrations, it's typically going to be marches that are led by controlled opposition anyway. So I just feel like, we have to change the paradigm for how we understand leadership and how we understand organizing, because it's not going to be this huge bureaucracy kind of like that we're used to. It is going to be very small and strategic units, how you mentioned, like a wolf pack mentality.
That's right.
Absolutely. I think that there's a serious need for us to delve deep into our creative mind and spirit to find new and more effective ways of organizing and structuring an organization that suit the time that we're in. I think Brother Onwali's last point is absolutely correct. And there are some people that I know that are doing that work, in that regard, so I want to affirm that too. At the same time, I think one of the major challenges that we have, coming back to this resources point, is that lack of resources also means that you're less able to make people aware of the good work that you're doing. So we don't present an image of success in a way that is as glittery and attractive to the masses of our people as all of the other flashing lights out there. Really, we're fighting just to get our people's attention. Among a massive noise, the words of Baba Aikweama 2000 seasons is coming to me right now. How shall your vocations be heard, when he speaks about shouting over the cacophony, and all of these dynamics, right, that we're having to deal with. And that's the reality. And the only way to do it is to be extremely creative. We have to tap into some serious levels of genius, in order to do that. And I think that there's a double edge there, because we don't want to lose all that our ancestors did and built, and the methods that they use. Some of it is still valid. For example, like when we look at what the UNIA was able to do with media, the principle of that remains the same. The form has changed. We have mass multimedia on various different levels now, but the effectiveness of the media is probably even more relevant today than it was in 1920. and whatever else like that. So we really have to get creative in this regard. But the challenge is that our people's sensibility and our own, if we don't divorce ourselves from the reality of our people, have been thoroughly induced. So we are trained to respond to certain stimuli over other stimuli. And there's a frequency that we have to, literally and figuratively, in the sense of frequency, what that means both scientifically and numerically, which is related, right? There's a frequency that we have to increase in terms of tuning into the minds and spirits of our people, that encourages or teaches how to respond to an African sovereign stimuli with greater effectiveness, if that makes sense. That is our challenge. And that sounds really esoteric, but it's real, in that respect.
I think I'm so thankful that you brought it there. I also want to shout out Brother Aoye, who is in the house. May the honorable ancestors continue to speak through us. Ashe, because one of the things that I felt very strongly was also, because as you were speaking, it just brought to me early on in my journey, the thing that kept coming to me, the way that the ancestors would directly speak to me, whether it would be readings, Babalaos, whatever. Creativity will give you success where others have failed. Creativity will give you success where others have failed. It's like it literally constantly rings. And back to Brother Mawali's point of the reality that it's not going to look the way it's looked before. And we have to, right, we're in the season of shifting, right? We just started into our new year, right? The spring equinox. That shedding happens in order for the new growth to come. So there's a lot of those ideas and thoughts that we do have to shed, because it's not about quantity, it's about quality, because it is a spiritual work. And when we talk about organizing, like I get what you're saying, like we could bring it practical, but the reality is the high level work is what's going to come down into the practical work. But when you have that spiritual stability, that's the rooting, that's the most solid foundation that anything can be built upon.
Yes.
So within that context, we have to understand we are the ancestors.
Yeah.
We have to understand that we are Neter, we are the divine. So we have to know that we have come for this work.
Yeah.
We have come. So those who have come will come. And I feel that that deep intrinsic trust of the process and really being able to move. But I think a brother also mentioned in the comments the fear, right? It's that development of courage. And, you know, everybody's moving through their own life, which is a rite of passage in itself. So those experiences are going to begin to cultivate and to connect, and the web continues to be woven from that. But I think that level of the leadership and the work and our perception of it is very important for us to bring into the conversation. And understanding, like we're talking about, as Baba Clark would say, like that one half of a wink of an eye within the moment that we're experiencing with this successful domestication. And what we have to really look at is the reality that we've had many models of leadership, successful leadership for millennia that we need to begin to pull from, right? And just spiral and expand. We're not trying to repeat the same thing, but we are going to be able to expand from that and also learn from this experience that we've had within the Ma'afa, because it's been purposeful. Nothing happens for nothing. We say here, Nade Atoa. Nothing happens for nothing. So there's a lot of wisdom within the struggle and the challenges that we've come through that are going to be part of creating our next golden age.
Gotcha.
Yeah, I want to build on what you were saying there, sis, about the shifting landscape, the shifting spiritual and political landscape that is occurring in a very real way. And I think it absolutely requires for you, if you are going to be engaged in this fight, you have to be grounded spiritually. You have to be connected, because you are going to need transmissions. You're going to need downloads that you won't be able to receive from just studying history alone. You know, the books are not going to be enough for this next phase of the war that we're entering into. Like, you have to be grounded in a very real way. And there was something else that I wanted to add here, and I do not want to forget it, because I feel like it was very important. Oh, that's what I was going to say. When we talk about leadership, we have to recognize that, you know, leadership is not a static skill set, and not all leadership is called for, depending on the time that we're in, right? In times of peace, you know, a peacetime leader who is managing a mature state or mature civilization is a different type of leader than in a time of chaos or a time of war, when you have a crumbling state and you have, you know, the mindset of the people is underdeveloped and under attack, and you have no state, right? Like, the type of leadership that you need is going to have to be drastically different. Like, you're going to need people who have that kind of like more of a wartime or a building mentality. Like, it's one thing to manage or run a nation. It's a completely different thing to create or build or establish a nation, because it just takes a different level of politic, of diplomacy, of strategy, of seriousness, right? Because, like, you have both internal and external opposition to the change or transformation that you are looking to bring into formation. You understand what I'm saying? So I just think that we have to be very nimble. We have to be very agile right now.
You gotta be like cats.
What was that?
We gotta be like cats. Like, Bastet has been very present, you know, not only in the musical aspect, but Bastet is also about that agility, right? You think a cat always lands on his feet, but a cat can squeeze through any through any crack or crevice, right? That's necessary. They got 9 lives for a reason.
Yes.
So I just think of that energetically in terms of like a natural spirit and force of nature that is very supportive and instrumental in our prophecy unfolding as well. Because the other thing we have to remember is this has all been written. You know, it's literally been written in stone. So we just we living it out. And those are also the things we have to retrieve.
Yes.
But I was thinking about it in the context of what's being shared for a lot of people, right? We know the leadership is being marketed, right? Everything's being marketed. We're in a capitalist system, so everything's for sale.
Mm-hmm.
And within that context, to know, you know, like who, if these people who are the misleaders are not even the leaders, right? They're just being, would you call them overseers?
Overseers.
Who is leading? Yeah, who's directing that narrative? Like who is actually, who's guiding the misleaders? Like who's actually leading things? Like where they're getting this narrative and direction from? Can y'all speak on that? You also mentioned misleadership is safe. Yes.
Go ahead, Brother Shuffle.
Very
Yeah,
safe.
that is an interesting and multi-dimensional question, because when you asked it, I thought about 10 different things
Mm-hmm.
at once. One of the things that I thought about is coming out of what I said before in terms of FBI, Jago, Hoover, Cohen, Topro. I think we've got to a point whereby that negative characterization, a lot of us are very invested in.
Yeah.
Yeah, like we prefer the messed up, you know what I'm saying, the guy who's teeth in the money, you know, and got a wife but sleeping with 10 different other women, or whatever. We prefer that because it allows us to justify our lack of organizational commitment.
Yeah.
Right? We prefer the self-destructing guy on the internet to the elder who's been diligently building that school for 20 years. Yeah, you know what I'm saying? We prefer the donations
We want
guy,
entertainment.
right? Yeah, that's
we
it.
want the entertainment.
Right, that's what we prefer, because we can say, well, where the money there, yeah, and where the school there. We can ask them questions, yeah. But then the sister who has been running the school for 30 years, we prefer that, right? We prefer these things, and this is all being directed by the diversion from our sincere leadership, yeah. But I think that another aspect of this, you spoke, you play Mama Marimba Ani, and she spoke about the goals, and Brother Amwali stressed that earlier, yeah, what the goals are, yeah. And I think what I'm learning more is that there is something different, yeah, that comes when you're dealing with nation building, yeah. When your goal is sovereignty, you reason differently, yeah. Even within the context of people that are studying African history and dealing with African-centered scholarship, there's a difference between people that are actively pursuing nationhood, yeah, and nation building as an intentionality, and those who are not. And I think the what's leading the misleadership are the intentions other than liberation, freedom, a nation of our own, yeah, sovereignty, cultural affirmation, right? You know what I'm saying? It's whatever that agenda is, which is defined by the system that we live in. In our Kevin, we call them euphemisms. We juxtapose euphemisms with total liberation. So the goal becomes anti-racism and defund the police. Yeah, you know what I'm saying. You know, what's it called? Civil rights, and you know what I mean. Whatever else it is, right? Climate justice. Yeah. And whatever else it is, they become distractions, because all of these agendas are defined by this system. Yeah. And so therefore the leadership that abides by those agendas will reflect the system itself, if that makes sense.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, for me, the paradigm of the plantation, it always presents the most clarity, because when you understand our context through the lens of the plantation, and when you start having conversations about leadership in that regard, it's a different conversation, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because like on the plantation, if you understand, that you're subjugated and dominated in that type of way, then how does leadership present itself, right? And it typically presents itself in a very clandestine kind of manner. I was just recently watching Sankofa again for like the third or fourth time. I watched it recently because it's now on Netflix. So if anybody hasn't watched it and you have Netflix, you don't have an excuse not to watch it. But I was thinking about the elders who were, under the darkness of the moon, under the light of the moon, going into the woods to get initiated and to plot rebellion, right? Like for me, like that is the motto of leadership. So sometimes in many ways, the so-called misleaders, the overseers that are out there, they're in place to give you cover, right? Because we exist right now today. The surveillance state of 2022 is not the surveillance state that our ancestors had to contend with in 1922. It is a different ball game, and the economic factors that we have to contend with on a global scale, and also the tools of the weapons of mass distraction, right? The weapons of mental destruction that society has at their hands today is like, it's a magnitude of 10,000 in comparison to what things were in the 1920s. So like I'm just saying that the challenges that we face as leaders and organizers today, I think that we have to give ourselves credit for even still being
Existing.
willing
You
to
are correct.
fight, but not just that, still having a belief that victory is ours to lose.
Yes.
You understand what I'm saying? So like, because when you look around, and I know you mentioned
donations.
you mentioned that situation right there, but even that situation, to be honest, I think it serves a purpose, because
100%.
it meets people where they are, and people
100%.
who may have otherwise not been activated in their consciousness at all,
100%.
have been brought into some new level of consciousness based
100%.
upon their interfacing with that brother. And the
Yes.
goal is to
100%.
keep them moving, to the
100%.
next level, to the next level, to the next level.
100%. And
Absolutely.
can I just follow that up, sis? Because he mentioned Sankofa, which is one of my favorite films, and it adds another dimension to this for me. Which there's so many dimensions in this, but the if we talk about leadership, the character of Afriye, aka Nunu, in that film really exemplifies many of the principles of leadership that we need. Nunu Afriye is the spirit, of the ancestors on that plantation. They all look to her, and she leads as a mother, but she also leads as a warrior. She also leads as a doula. She is the conscience, of everybody in that situation. So even the overseer, who is battling between his relatively privileged position and his commitment to his brothers and sisters on the plantation, he seeks to resolve that conflict within himself through Nunu, because Nunu is the mother, but she's also the warrior, right? In that situation, and this is important in a time where one of the reasons why I appreciate the work of Brother Omwale so much is this crystallization of the concept of African manhood, which is needed in this time, especially because of the attack against African manhood and African manhood in leadership. We're being acculturated into a consciousness that seeks to convince us of the idea that African manhood is a destructive function, plays a destructive role within our communities inherently. And therefore African manhood in leadership must, through necessity, oppress, subjugate, destroy, abuse. This is what we are being taught at the moment. And I think there are two lessons in that we must, one, affirm, as you were saying, my sister, the idea of the fact that we have millennia, yes, of beautiful and positive examples of leadership. But then the example within that as well is that the accentuation and the affirmation of the feminine principle within that context as well. Yeah, that as men, our ideals of leadership are consciously complementary to that of our sisters, the women in our community, and so on and so forth. And we affirm this as a defining characteristic of African manhood, and not one that we're borrowing, right? But something that we inherit through our ancestral traditions, spiritual, cultural traditions, and even the ways in which we've organized, imperfect as they may have been. We see throughout the organizations of our recent history the attempt to readdress that balance, levels. And we need to speak about that more and be unashamed about the fact, that we may not have solved all the problems in 1890 or 1920 or 1960, but we can see that we were on the road and we were asking those questions, and we made significant strides, in terms of restoring the leadership balance between the men and the women, the masculine and the feminine energies within our community. When you said Sankofa, it just brought all of that to my consciousness. So
Give thanks.
I say, I appreciate that coming up, because it brings me back to one of the artifacts that we recently published on hightopsandheels.com is the Ancestors Speak Hatshepsut, which Brother Trinity, who's one of the members of the militia, the Tudimat militia, created and crafted, he co-created a audio expression for the great Nesubiti Hatshepsut. And I think she becomes a very beautiful model to look at, because like what we're talking about is like our example, like what are the models of leadership that we can look at, and the need to establish that equilibrium, right? Ma'at. But within that context, I think a lot about like, why is the attack so focused on our men? There is an important aspect for us to look at there. But there were certain points as well, right? It's not about necessarily the person, but when you can look at the example of Hatshepsut and see that, this is a rare occurrence. It wasn't the norm for a woman to hold that position, but because of the worthiness and the necessity in that moment, that could happen, and our culture allowed for that to flourish, really to be more successful than many other men in that position. And I think about that position of Nesubiti in particular, because it was mostly men who carried that position because of the active principle and the honoring of the masculine energy in its particular function. And I think that that's significant in the when we think about the actual crown and the two twins, right? The cobra and the vulture that were worn by the Nesubiti or the pharaohs. And even though these were men, they were constantly carrying these two divine feminine energies on the crown to show that they were being directed by the cobra being that divine feminine intuition, but also that selfless mothering energy, that nurturing energy, that aspect of the divine feminine as well. So even when we had males in the position of leadership, that feminine principle, because we knew the divine symmetry that we both carry, both masculine and feminine energy. So I do recommend that artifact on hightopsandheels.com about Hatshepsut. And the next one is going to be on Dr. Ben, because we're going through the board of ancestors. I also saw Brother Alye mentioning our honorable ancestors are the leaders in traditional. We sit at altars and ask them before we join in community and share similar messages. Our first altars are our bodies. And I think that this is very significant, because even in the context, our work is rooted in ritual. You know, the reality is it must be that way in order for us to have success moving forward. So honoring the ancestors as the primary guiding principle and force to direct where we go, because they also have a higher vantage point from the dimension that they are able to function within, and their accessibility to influence this particular dimension.
Yeah.
And
I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Yeah.
No, go ahead.
No, go ahead.
I don't want to cut off your flow.
I was gonna go somewhere else. So if it was in relation.
Well, it's in relation to this topic on leadership and on misleadership, because I think because our community has experienced just successions of bad leadership or ineffective leadership or misleadership, it's created a lack of respect for leadership, right? You know, we had this conversation recently about the need to respect the chain of command, the need to respect hierarchy. And it's like your black skin in the eyes of many of our people, because we've had our minds retarded, right? Because we have had our minds distorted. Your black skin disqualifies you for leadership. Like, there is no hierarchy. You're black just like me, so why should I have to listen to you? And the point that I want to make about true and divine leadership is that it is an anointed leadership. It does come with gifts. You understand what I'm saying? Like, it comes with gifts that are provided to you from divinity so that you can use in your assignment to lead. And at the end of the day, everybody has the capability of leading, but not everybody is called to lead. So it's about having, the humility to understand that we are all called to serve, but not everybody is going to serve in that role as the so-called leader who's kind of like given the direction. Because at the end of the day, whether it's military or whether it is governance, there are going to be times that call for executive decision making that people who are a part of the collective are going to have to respect and move on that if we truly want to win. So we have to build back up a respect for our leaders. And I think that's why the work up to Hootie Ma'at is so important, right? This embodied leadership, because like, you just can't say that you're a leader because you have a title. You have to embody it. You have to earn it. You have to live it. You have to walk it. And that is what's going to once again make leadership something to be respected, right? Because that person's characteristics are commendable. That person has clearly been anointed. That person is striving based upon a higher calling. And we can't, I don't think that we can get away from that. And I think that some of the materialist conceptions of revolution have moved us away from that particular model. And I think that we are going to have to reintroduce and recultivate that level of divine leadership within our collective.
You said some stuff there, brother. I don't even know if everybody caught where you was going with that. But it's powers, but this brings us back to this idea of organization as well, because all of those are only ever worked out within actually organizing. Yeah, I've been born and raised in organizing, and I'm in positions where sometimes I'm in leadership, and sometimes I'm in fellowship, right? Yeah. And you have to know when to humble yourself and when to assert yourself. Yeah, in this regard, right? It's a balance that has to be struck. Yeah, and a humility and a sense of purpose that has to be struck. And my father, from as long as I can remember, has said we will never win this war until we are willing to submit ourselves to African authority. Yeah, until we are willing, because as it stands right now, we're not no institution, no nation state that can punish our people for wrongs done against the nation, right? We're not there yet. Yeah, we haven't built those institutions yet. We're not at that stage of development. So some of us, on principle alone, based upon the principle of these are our goals, and this is the kinds of characteristics that we need to assume in order to achieve these goals, have to do so on the principle of I am submitting to African authority come what may. Yeah. Instead of, well, when I get vexed, I can run go, I'm a job, yeah, and run go join the Democratic or the Labour Party, and run, you know what I'm saying? Can mash up, whatever was taking place and go and chat the organization in the community, right? Because I don't want to submit to the authority. Sometimes we're gonna have to humble ourselves, yeah, within the context of organization for the sake of the forward development of our people, and that is a sacrifice, yeah. That until we get to a critical mass of people that are willing to make that sacrifice, we're marking time, yeah, to a significant degree.
Yeah, it's about a critical mass of people coming back into alignment with the divine, because the authority that we speak of is, first of all, it's about how we understand ourselves. If we understand ourselves as divine beings, and that means that we are in tune with cosmic authority, right? Sister Neff talked about like that symmetry, as above, so below. So our understanding, I don't know if you were Shakara, if you caught my presentation that I gave during the RBG Centennial Conference, but I laid out a preliminary argument for a system of self-government that I refer to as like a cosmocracy. And it's it's basically a form of government that is reflective of the divine authority, that is reflective of the divine hierarchy. So once we kind of like formalize that, then as long as your leaders are acting within that principle, then it's okay for you to accept the leadership, because we're all acting based upon the same principles and the same authority. You understand what I'm saying? So I feel like that's what we have to get back to, that we currently are not aligned with. We've been disaligned with that, and it's about coming back into alignment.
Yeah, and I definitely want to expand on that a bit, because I think that's very, very critical and very important. And it's even beyond the acting within that. It's the being that, because when we look back and we take the narrative that we've been given about what happened ancestrally, like, oh, this person thought, oh, she convinced people that Hatshepsut, they say she convinced people that she was Amun's daughter, and like, it's these narratives placed on it. But the reality is we're not even perceiving what it was to exist with that degree of connectivity and embodiment of divine forces, because we have to carry ourselves to a certain degree of purification and a certain level of discipline in order to really bring forward that energy. Because that's the reality. When we talk about that authority is given. It is a birthright. It goes back to what you're saying. When we look at the astrology and the astronomy and the influences, we've all come tuned already to be that which we are. But the reality is we have to allow things to unfold. And it goes back to that sacrifice, which is coupled with trust, right? It's also that humility of just trusting and allowing things to unfold themselves, instead of constantly wanting to impose ourselves, because a lot of that comes from the ego space, which the ego is a necessary energy. We're not throwing out the proverbial baby with the bathwater. That's also what the Yorugu have come to teach us, right? Is self-preservation. So there's a valuable lesson that we will carry forward. But there is the reality that unhealthy ego and the reality of where most people are functioning with that right now, we're not able to be trusted. We can't be trusted. We have to prove that we can be trusted to be given our gifts. And as we elevate, we become trustworthy. We're given more gifts. So you're telling me if I walk on water, you're going to tell me that you're not going to listen to me? You get what I'm saying? Like, I know that's an extreme, but it's just you gotta prove to the people what you are. You do have and carry that authority as well. So I think that was a very important point to be lifted.
You touched on something there, sis, because that's also part of the problem. We we believe in the goals and the intentions and the forms of leadership that we believe did actually walk on water. Yeah. And so the sacrifices of a Nat Turner or a Marcus Garvey or a Henrietta Vinton Davis or a Mbuyane Handa are less magical, yeah, to us. The blood of our ancestors, yeah, doesn't mean as much to us, yeah, as the blood.
And
Sorry, go on.
yeah.
Go on,
I
sister.
don't want to cut you off, but I really feel that that's because we really don't allow ourselves to really go there. Like, we don't allow ourselves to really go there and be.
Yeah.
What did it take for Nat Turner to do that? You can stand within where you are right now today and
Yes.
cast judgments
Right.
and make these assumptions or whatever, but the reality is that was a miracle. What
Miracle.
Harriet Tubman did
Exactly.
was a miracle.
Exactly.
But we're looking at things with the wrong lens.
All right.
And on top of that, a lot of our perspectives are already skewed because of the misleadership, miseducation.
Exactly.
Of these things.
And this brings us back right to the point of ritual. Yeah. And I think about it sometimes because I wonder why, like, my dad used to say when I was a child, nothing else motivates me other than the liberation of African people. And I question that why, what is that? And I was raised within ritual to reinforce a lot of these things. You know what I'm saying? That the power of when you look in the one of the brothers mentioned indigenous African spiritual systems, and when you look at a lot of rituals and ceremony within our spiritual systems, a lot of it is like reenactments of ancestral stories, whereby in the process of the ritual we become the ancestors and we live through and go through what the ancestors went through. And so in our daily lives we're carrying that energy, that spirit, those lessons, yeah, and applying them. And sometimes we challenge the ancestors and we say, well, oh, you did go on with this and we needed this, and we correct whatever they weren't able to correct in our right. But it's because when we're so out of sync with each other, because we're not engaged in collective ritual, our consciousness is not synchronized within rituals that reinforce African sovereignty, that reinforce African liberation. All of our rituals speak against ourselves. All of our rituals are designed to empower those who seek to oppress us. Our rituals are governed by the lights of seeking American presidency, or there's conversations now about becoming British Caribbean in the UK at the moment where I'm based. Yeah. And this is our goal. So our rituals reflect that intentionality.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We
That's what's
are.
taking place at the moment. Right.
Yeah. You know? Get the applause.
No, I got you. Hold on, I'll get you that right there. Drop a bomb for you. And
drop a bomb.
Exactly.
Exactly.
You know what? We are spellbound right now. One of the things that I am absolutely certain of, and I'm sure my my comrades, my fellow warriors on the panel are also certain of, is that our opposition is abundantly clear of the power of narratives and of rituals and of magic and of words, and they are using all of this sacred technology on us. Like we are really spellbound right now, and some of us have broken free from the spell, and while others are still, you know what I mean, what they refer to as NPCs, non-player characters. You know what I mean? We've been roped into an unactive player in somebody else's story, you know, and they are making good of your material resource, right? Because you don't know about your spiritual. You don't know who you are. And because you don't know who you are, they're making use of your energy. They're making use of your currency, right? Your currency and your energy is being used to build up their vision, is being used to build up their world. But once you break free from their spell, that's when you lose the fear. You know what I mean? That's when you have a real understanding that death is something that doesn't even really exist. It's really just transition. Like you don't like what you are does not die. You understand what I'm saying? So what they've done is they've captivated you, they have you spellbound, they have you ritualized, and you are afraid to break free from the matrix that the architect has developed for your existence on this particular realm. So,
Yeah, yeah, that's very, very important, because that's why we have to begin with liberating the spirit of the people. And when you said the matrix, I always like to bring up my elder Baba Heru, because he was the first person who told me it's not a matrix. This system that they've created, the truth is the matrix, because the matrix is a womb and we are in a cosmic womb, right? Nut. And what they've created is a patrix. And when we think about it in that context, it is important to make that distinction, because the system that they've created is one of imbalance. And we know that that's what's creating the disorder and the chaos. So in order for us to bring things down, there was a brother who says structure and policy. Yes, we began to associate that with the Yoruba and with the system that they've created, where so many times when it's time to bring discipline, when it's time to bring structure and policy, people don't want it, because they're like, nah, we gotta flow, we gotta, like that's the natural way, and we need to, hierarchy, no one wants that, right? All these systems and ways of order have to be within balance, within an equilibrium. And we get that within the true context of the matrix, right? Within the cosmic womb, we're in a solar system, right? The planets are in order, right? There are natural laws governing the way things function and move. So that is very necessary within the context of us right here, right now, right? Because a lot of times people think this conversation is happening up here, but it's very practical when we can embody these things, right? And live them, and our life can reflect those things. Because if your life is organized, that's a reflection of your mind being organized and your spirit being organized.
absolutely.
So when we talk about creating organization, that's where we have to begin. We have to work our way backwards, so that if we start up here, we know it's going to come down. Everything starts in spirit and then takes form. And that's very important for us. Yeah, you were gonna
No, I was gonna say stop
comment
putting
on
that.
that?
Yeah, stop putting our African genius into boxes. Like that's one of the things that I have a great disdain for. Dr. Amos Wilson used to always push back when people say, African people, we are, we are analytical. We are more intuitive. We're not analytic. It's like, no, we can intuit and we can analyze. You know what I mean? We can be linear and
We can do both.
we can do both. Like so stop boxing us in. And the only reason why I'm saying it is because we're having this conversation right now, and a lot of it is grounded in the importance of spirit. And people will hear what we're saying and they'll want to box us in, like, oh, they're, because people will always come back to me, right, when I'm talking about nature. They're like, well, Brother Omuwale, well, what about modern warfare and I'm with that as well. I understand the reality that we are in, but I'm trying to get you to tap into your power, get you to understand who you are, because you can't fight if you're a boxer. There's a reason why they give you a 10 count after you get knocked out. They want to give you a chance to get properly oriented so you can get your legs under you so you can fight again. You are in a ring and you're punch drunk right now. You're not oriented. You have somebody else's orientation. You don't know where you at. Like, you're throwing punches at the referee. So what I'm trying to do is say to you, like, all right, we need to be fighting, but you need to first ground yourself in who you are, right? Man, know thyself. Woman, know thyself. Like, who are you? And once you're grounded, then you're better prepared to strike out either offensive or defensive, whatever you need to do to win.
Agreed. Something was brought to mind because when you said this term cosmocracy at the convention, Rohan Wale, it stuck with me. And a brother just put on the screen that quite literally in the Igbo tradition, the term omenala, yeah, and related as that ordinani, speak to the laws of the universe. Literally, this is the religion of the people. Yeah, it's referred to as omenala. Similar, you find in other. He mentioned a Kikonga terminology as well, and also in Zulu. I think it's isi untu, yeah. Which is like untu is like the essence, the primordial force that animates the universe, that gives, from which creation arises, and then isi is the laws associated with, right? So you have isi untu. Untu is like when you get ban untu from, yeah, and so we're all manifestations of that vital force, yeah. And so I'm saying all of this to say a part of it as well is that we are not taught to think and develop, and shout out to my empress, by the way. This is my empress on the screen right about now.
Peace to the
All right.
goddess.
Yeah. So yeah. What's it? The what was I? Yeah. We're not. We have been taught to de-intellectualize the deep thought, yeah, or philosophy that comes from our ancestral traditions. So we feel as though we need to replace them with Western thought, yeah. And that's not to say that we can't learn anything. As you said, my sister, they came to teach us something, right? So it doesn't mean that we can't learn anything from Western, but the idea that we make that the basis, the foundation of our thoughts, and we can't think without it, is a problem. And typically this comes with my brothers and sisters who are influenced by Marx, yeah, Karl Marx, right? And quite frankly, Adam Smith and the boys, yeah, that we get locked into a polarity between these two white men, and we can't think outside of that. And so when we say cosmocracy, it sounds like abstract Wakanda nonsense, right? That's what it sounds like, because we actually haven't engaged with the high culture and deep thought of our people.
Yeah.
We don't know what it means to look to the universe to derive laws that govern social, political, and economic structure and institution and ways and self-development and ways of being, and how that we don't understand the idea that we see ourselves as a part of the universe and nature, and that informs how we develop politically in nation states. And so it would be taboo, for example, within our indigenous spiritual systems, to develop technologically at the expense of the natural environment. This is alien, yeah, to our asili, our cultural seed. This is alien to that kind of, and the only way that comes about is if we see ourselves as detached from nature.
Yeah.
And this is the cultural context. This is the asili that has dominated our existence from the day of our birth in this particular dispensation of time. Yeah, you know what I'm saying? And we find it very difficult. Say this?
Objectivity.
Object. And the rhetorical ethic. Yeah. You know what I'm saying? And all of these things. Even us speaking right about now, we're drawing on wisdom of greats in us, and not all of them are even ancestors. Yeah, like I always say to people,
Right.
what if we all just read Urugu and Blueprint for Black Power, right? Right?
Yeah.
You know
Coming up soon. We're doing
right?
a
You know what I
study
mean?
guide on.
Like, what if we all just did that and said, you know what, let's work on the basis of just the philosophies that are encapsulated in these texts. Yeah. And I'm saying that, understanding that a lot of the ancestors that came before them is what they're drawing on to write those, but they were written in the modern age, right? So let's do that. And I'm saying, like, we don't fully it's criminal. My father said to me one time, you know, we've been blessed by some of the greatest leaders. We're talking about leadership, right? That have ever walked human creation. And he said he feels like other people would have done more with the leaders that we had if they had those leaders. Sometimes he feels like that. And I thought that was a mad statement, but I get where he's coming from.
Yeah. Well, this is what I'll say. Neff, I think we're getting playback from you. We might be getting. I don't know if you have your YouTube on in the back, but we get an echo.
Okay.
All right. I'll say is this. In order to get to that next level in terms of what we desire for our own community, there's going to have to be we're going to have to do battle internally
Yeah.
as well. And it's unfortunate because we are still being assaulted. We're still being besieged externally, but like there's going to be no coming together without cleaning house. You are, and so that, so those of us who are serious are really going to have to get organized to the point where we are a fashioned instrument of war to be wielded both against internal and external threats, to use that power to once again lead, and to show people the way. Because right now we have way too much chaos. We have way too many individuals who are just fleecing the flock. And until we get them out of the way and reestablish order, there's levels of establishing order that I would not entertain that conversation over such airways. But I'm saying, if you catch my drift, that level of order establishment has to be reached if we are serious about what we are serious about.
There's one level that I will entertain. Just to say this, I want to bring the ancestor Kwame Ture to the proceedings. One of the things that I've realized about my parents' generation of Pan-Africanists that I think we definitely need to revive among the younger generation of Pan-Africanists is this idea of political education, which Baba Kwame Ture was a stickler for, to the point where people ridicule him for it. But there's a sharpness, there's an ideological and functional sharpness that I find a lot of the people in my parents' generation had, because a lot of them went through it, the All African People's Revolutionary Party study program, whether they remain socialist or not. There's a certain thing that comes with having a focused study on the conditions and the political movements of African people, and having and the awareness that it gives you of the forces that are operating in the world, and how they consistently relate to us as a people, and concepts like neocolonialism, for example, and what that is, and how it's been defined and how it functions in the environment and the institutions that are designed to perpetuate it, that I think we definitely need to carry forward in future generations.
Absolutely. I think it's very important for us to begin to transmit the knowledge that has allowed us to arrive here, because it's a lot. Like you said, we're building on a strong foundation, right? When we think of Diopism, right? Or we think of all of the foundational elements of things. But I wanted to mention THNK at this portion because one of our programs, THNK, Thoughts, Home, New Knowledge, right? This is a distribution channel. We consider it a star of that system. And this panel is part of that ongoing work, which includes study sessions. So we are going to bring back the study session around Blueprint for Black Power, but we're also working in collaboration with the African War College to develop our strategic partnership. I'm hoping we can come together for Yerugu and studying that work. But in the context of what you shared, right, our revolutionary, and you as well, Brother Omawali, in terms of like, there's certain places we really have to start at the foundation. So the revolutionary ideology of Tehuti Ma'at is, revolution is defined as healing, first and foremost, healing, liberation, restoration, elevation, and expansion. But we have to begin with that healing process, and even what you were saying about the internal dynamic, and your Empress had mentioned the self-respect, right? We have to begin that internal work, which is really the most challenging part, because what has us tethered to this system, right? So we have to begin to really deal with that internal battle of what we've seen as Set and Heru ancestrally, right? You have the higher and the lower self battling, not for one to destroy the other, but for there to be a full integration, right? To have dominion over your lower self, because your lower self, your ego is going to be what allows you to survive and to wield your power. So there is a very important aspect that I really think is important for us to begin to cultivate through distribution channels like this panel, but the study groups, the book clubs, all of the various ways that the THNK curriculum and the ideology begins to be shared, because a lot of the wisdom of even the critical assessment of other theories, you know, like I've recently been reading, I'm not trying to put nobody on blast, but the political theory of African internationalism, right? We have a lot of ideologies that have been put forward that are not built on the foundation of African-centered perspective, right? It's really coming from building on the foundation of the enemy, which I think has to be critically evaluated with seriousness for people who are coming into this work. Because I'm just going to bring us back around to the point earlier around organization, and you were reading from the COINTELPRO document. And the thing is, they can't stop what's happening, right? They cannot stop us from taking back the authority of the planet. It's our destiny. So within that reality, it's important for us to understand when we talk about winning the hearts and minds of the youth, we have to understand as well that cosmically, this planet is shifting. And the waves of the rise in consciousness that's happening in waves, the younger people who are coming in, this is the level that they have to be engaged at, because these ancestors are coming in already ready, you know, to handle this high level dialogue. And if you come with anything less than that, I don't think we would be talking to the correct people. So when we're thinking about that future, like, I always like to emphasize and understand that we're on track. Everything is happening in divine alignment, and the work that is being done and cultivated right now is very important. But I also think about this work, like this panel, being for those who don't have that knowledge and that information. And it brings us back around to the point of, you know, because I think that this is actually something that's very important. Why is organization important right now in this time? We did mention its relation to leadership.
Yeah.
But why?
Organization is power. You know, like you know, power is the ability to act, and organization is the instrument that gives you the ability to act as a collective rather than an individual. So it's very significant because we need to have an agenda for the collective that we are all individually and collectively acting upon, and organization is the vehicle that allows us to achieve that.
Sure. I'll just add to that the issue of accountability. Organization gives you a structure to be accountable to in terms of your actions, your thoughts and ideas. And this is extremely important if we're talking about the misdirection and the marketing of the misdirection of our leadership. Because a lot, like we had a leadership that was talking about liberation and these kinds of things prior to, and now we're talking about democracy and development, right? But they're always able to throw out buzz terminologies, and I'll give you an example of what I mean. Up until World War II, race was everything. And then after World War II, the agenda changed, and they decided actually race is not scientific. right. And so they've got us saying race isn't scientific, and therefore all human beings are Africans, right? And so we can't affirm an African political intentionality because all human beings are African, right? And so there are many of us, even in African-centered circles, that are buying into this nonsense, and not without taking consideration of the fact that this is not a scientific statement; it's a political statement.
Yeah.
And these people have been able to dismantle the concept of race
Yeah.
while maintaining the global hegemony of European imperialism and global white supremacy. They dismantle race when the majority of the nations in the quote unquote UN Security Council are white nations,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Yeah.
But race doesn't matter anymore, right?
Yeah.
The IMF and the World Bank is still run by white nations, but race doesn't matter anymore. Yeah, democracy is the export of Western imperialist nations, but race doesn't matter anymore. And so we're buying into this while they're maintaining and reworking and redefining and representing their power to the world. And so organization gives us the ideological clarity to maintain our defining principles in the face of a changing and evolving world.
Yeah. Let me say this really quick.
Sir.
The battlefield is where your sword is sharpened.
Yes,
And
sir.
you have a lot of people, because you referred to folks in the African centered movement.
Yes, sir.
Leadership qualifies itself.
Yes,
A
sir.
lot of people have disqualified themselves, whereas though I don't think that they intend to be misleaders, but because they removed themselves from the ranks of the fighters, their analysis is no longer reflective of the state of the present day battlefield. So therefore, when instrumental issues come up and watershed moments come up, they find themselves on the wrong side of liberation and sovereignty. And that's because they are not, they are not where the action is. They've removed themselves to the ivory tower. They've removed themselves to just the creation of conferences about the past. Now, the past is significant because the further you can see into the past, the further you can see into the future. But if you just stay in the past and you're not using it as an instrument to create your new future, but more importantly, to come up with strategies to dismantle the obstacles that prevent you from getting to said future, then you disqualify yourself. So there is a lot of leadership that may have been in a position of thought leadership in the 1990s and the 1980s, maybe the 1970s, but in 2022 they've disqualified themselves. So I'm not going to follow you just because you are an elder. I'm not going to follow you because you've written a lot and because you could tell me all about ancient. And I'm not going to follow you for those reasons. Those reasons are not sufficient on the battlefield. You know what I mean? It doesn't mean that I'm going to disrespect you, as an elder, and it doesn't mean that I have a lack of appreciation for your contributions. But there comes a point in time where everybody has to stand up and be accounted for, and I feel like we've reached that point in time, and that time will continue to reoccur, and people are being accounted for on the wrong side of the on the wrong side of the fox.
Scales.
Yeah, so that's what's happening right now.
Yeah, that's happening a lot. There's a lot of energy that's on like the wrong side of the scale, and we're wondering what's going on.
Yeah.
And I really feel very strongly about what you shared, because in the context of like the regurgitation that tends to happen of the past, we lose sight of, because the word conscious in itself has lost its luster. I like to simplify it and just say presence, right? Like we have to be able to be present. And if we're not able to be present, we're not on time. And that's very critical right now. It's very critical right now for us to be on our time, not on, like, as we talked about, their narrative, their time. They want to say it's not about race. It's not about that. Like, it's the distractions that the brother mentioned earlier. There's all these distractions, but if we're able to be present and we could just take a moment to breathe, we can see very clearly what's going on, because it's not, everything is hidden in plain sight. They're not doing anything in secret at this point. It's not at all.
At this point, they have to reveal their hand.
Yeah. And I think that's very important. in the context of, like, I like how we kind of grounded it, like you mentioned the IMF, the UN, right? When we talk about, like, because we didn't talk about it from a real practical grounded perspective, but can we just drop a couple of other just direct grounded spaces that people can be clear on, like who is selecting the misleaders? You know, like where are these people coming from? We talked about, like, internally, yes, we can damage ourselves because of our own internalized, or the urugu within us that we're not exercising and we're not dealing with. So we can perpetuate that within ourselves. But there's also the systemic, organized approach to putting that misleadership forward, and the mass media, the capitalist media press, as Kwame Ture would say, marketing these people in front of us.
Yeah.
Using social media, using all of these different things, which social media is another big point that I think is very present, that we don't have the information to regurgitate. We really have to really have our own assessment and evaluation, because that's the mainstream media right now, is social media.
Mm-hmm.
But can you all share, you know, who's selecting these people? How are they being put in front of us in this way where they're all saying the same thing?
These people are self-selected, and in the sense that, like, if from an economic perspective, we can focus on this equation in one of two ways. We can look at it from a demand side, or we can look at it from a supply side. And I would argue that there is an overabundance of supply, people who are willing to supply themselves to the power that be, to be used, because to be used or be useful is what's the word I'm looking for here? It's beneficial for your individual interests, right? There's a lot of goodies that come with it. There's a lot of privilege, there's a lot of access, and monetary gain that comes with it. So a lot of people are just basically reading reading from a script. You understand what I'm saying? And they understand, like, I literally listen to people today to talk about the age of the what do they call it? The poor righteous teacher is over. So it's really about coming to the front of the group and figuring out a way to monetize the energy of the group for your own individual kind of like self-aggrandizement. It's all about you.
How
So
convenient.
yeah, exactly. So I would argue that the supply overrunneth, and I think that what drives the creation of that supply again gets back to fear, right? If we want to, you talked about it in your opening. You opened the way when you said, the ancestors call, and they want, we have no reason to fear, and Mama Frances Cress Wilson talked about the how fear and anxiety kind of like drives us. So, so I would say that we are self-selected in many ways, you know what I mean, to act and to serve as misleaders for the group.
Brother Omar was reminding me of an uncle that was a member of my organization, and he said something that was really profound once. He said, our people, we want to fight the white man, but we don't want to upset him. Yeah. Yeah, and it's there's a lot of goodies out there, for going along with the script. I think that to draw from what Brother Omwali said, there's a lot of the people are created. The misleadership is created from the collective consciousness of our people at any particular point in time. Yeah, and this idea of fear, which is what I was getting at with the quote from my uncle there. This idea of fear is paralyzing, right? And so there's an instinct that wants us to challenge the systems that are oppressing us, but we know there's a consequence for doing so.
Yeah.
And so there's a path of least resistance mentality that comes about, and we know that the path of least resistance is abiding by the constructs that are created among us. And I think part of this, coming back to what Omwani was saying as well, somewhere between the 60s and now, a transition occurred within the activist community, whereby leaders who call you to do work were replaced in prominence with scholars who call you to learn information. And there was a relationship between the people before, whereby they worked in a synergy. For example, Carter G. Woodson, Marcus Mosiah Garvey, yeah, both in leadership positions in different arenas, but the work, the activity was in the movement, and the work of a Carter G. Woodson informed the movement. Baba John Henry Clark, Omawale Malcolm X, yeah, many people don't know it was Baba John Henry Clark who penned the final draft of the charter of the OAAU, the Organization for American Unity, that Baba Omawale Malcolm X was scheduled to deliver on the day that he was assassinated. Yeah. Now, but we revere Baba John Henry Clark today, but we revere him as a historian, not as an organizer, right?
Or as a gun runner.
Or as a gun runner, right? Not as the man who Baba Osagyefo Kwame Nkrumah invited, yeah, to advise him in Ghana, right? This is what I'm saying. So all of these, so we look at our scholars one-dimensionally, and many of our scholars have become one-dimensional. Yeah. And so we have scholars today that are telling us that our political activity, whereas they teach us about African history, that our political activity must be confined to party politics within whatever nation state we are a member of, a citizen of at a moment in time. Making these public pronouncements whilst being the vanguard of representing the proper scholastic rigor and scientific appreciation of the disciplines of scholarship, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
Right. And so leaders call you to do work. Yeah. Right. And that is being replaced more and more and more, because we don't want, we know that work means sacrifice. And so we have, sorry, go ahead, sis. Go ahead.
No, I don't want to cut you off.
It was my last sentence. We have to develop the mentality of the fact that we have a goal for which we need to sacrifice, and that we are honored, yeah, to make those sacrifices.
Yes, it's an honor and a privilege, because to carry, even to lead is a service, right? You brought that up earlier, like to be a leader is to be a servant, and to have such a high calling is a privilege, and it's a great responsibility that has to be wielded with respect. I feel the point that you were making was very important in terms of the continuum between what Brother Omawale said, because it brings me back, like, I'm so thankful that the 2 books were lifted as well, because it brings me back to Yurugu and us being clear on, we have to deal with that baseline philosophical, just the simple aspect of how are we even thinking? Because our creating that dichotomy as if those things can't coexist is problematic. And we brought that up earlier, like we can do both. And we had multi-geniuses, right? Like when you think of, Imhotep, but even the scholars that we're mentioning, they were multi-geniuses. But our ability to not even be able to see that and not to do that for ourselves becomes problematic, because that is the Yurugu within us. And in order for us to truly be whole, we have to be able to see things whole so that we can create things whole. And it goes into like this paradigm, like a lot on Saturday, we're doing a live stream for THNK as well, THNK Beyond Spirituality. And one of the things we're going to really go into is the problem with the New Age movement, and that being one of the ways that we're being misled. Because this perception that we have on, belief and knowing, as if they're not, like they're connected, but you can't do both. Like we left the age of Pisces, so now we have to go into the age of Aquarius, and we can't believe, now we must know. But what is knowing if you don't believe, right? It has to be an expansion that takes that and expands that with the knowing that's coming, and we're able to move with that. But when we don't believe, that also stops us. So this idea, when they give us like, oh, you either vote Democrat or Republican, or like you don't have to vote at all. Like it's just like it's always that like when we look at what's being given to us as far as like where are they misleading us?
Yeah. You know,
We
it's
have to constantly not even look at what they put on the table. We got to look like we ain't even looking at that table.
yeah.
What you say?
No, was beautiful, right? When you look at the complete picture of what's happening right now, like in the Earth sphere, on our side of the chessboard, you have individuals who want liberation and who want freedom, but they want to attain it through a path that doesn't involve fighting. Yeah, it's like, yeah, I wanna get there, but like just show me a way to do it that doesn't involve fighting or that doesn't involve contending with our enemies.
Yeah.
But then on the other side, you talk about like the new age spirituality movement. There are lots of white gurus out there that have been studying and meditating and sitting at the feet of, different indigenous practices around the world. And the splinter that is in their mind is they believe that they can get transcendence without paying the price, right? Meaning that there's a debt. You don't get to do what was done to our ancestors for generations and generations without paying for it. So they believe that, they can meditate and strip them. Like you can do all the meditation, you can get rid of your ego, you can do all the stuff that you desire to do, but there's a cosmic debt that has to be paid. Your ancestors don't get to do what was done to our ancestors without that debt being paid, and the bill is due. The bill is due, so you can be as spiritual. And I mean, I don't want to say I find
Well,
it.
we got to come collect.
I'm just saying it's interesting because I watch them, and you talked earlier about like the time is now. Like I look at it like, they've been trying to build this dam, you know what I mean? Because the water is flowing. They're trying to keep it blocked, but like the dam has cracks in it. Yeah, I mean the levees are broken. Like they're trying to. All it takes is one catastrophe, like that they can't even account for, and you get an explosion through the dam and a shift in the political and economic reality. Like they can't control, nor can they prevent what's coming. It's only their arrogance that makes them believe that they can, and it's their ignorance that makes them believe that they can transcend without paying the price for what they've done.
And I think on the flip, the balance to that is that many of us are avoiding collecting the debt. Right now, Mama Marimba has this concept called the African Promise, and it's like she says it. Well, I remember this had such an impact upon me when I first heard her say it as a child. She says, "We chose to be born African." Yeah, right. Before we came here, we chose to be born African and fulfill this mission. And there's so much beauty in that understanding of the self. And I think that some of the one area that we need to you spoke about being grounded, sis. Yeah, in terms of this focus on leadership. One of the areas that we need to look at as well is expertise. Yeah. And excellence, yeah, that we see. I picked up this book because you mentioned Baba Sheikh Anta Diop earlier, and even in relation to what I last said, this it speaks to this in some way, shape, or form, because we often look at Baba Diop as a scholar exclusively, without putting into context what the purpose of his works were. The purpose of the works is, I believe, probably best defined in the title of this book. It's called Black Africa, the economic and cultural basis for a federated state.
Mm-hmm.
Black Africa, the economic and cultural basis for a federated state. This is after having written the cultural unity of Black Africa and sorry, I've just got books all over the place. The African origin of civilization, and colonial Black Africa, and so on and so forth. And now he's saying, well, actually, as a result of this history, this reconstructed grand African epic, as he calls it, that centers the Nile Valley as our classical civilization, as a result of identifying that we have organic cultural unity among ourselves as a people in terms of how we've developed over millennia as a result of having a geopolitical space, which is referred to as a continent, that has these natural resources and features. Yeah, we have the basis from which to develop a federated state. Yeah, that is the purpose of the works. You said multi-genius. This man was a multi-genius. He had his contradictions. Yeah, but he was a multi-genius, and his works are useful in that regard. But many of us treat Sheikh Anta Diop as a scholar, not a political activist. We don't know that he had a political party in Senegal, right? But he all of his genius, his expertise in anthropology and the sciences and history was brought to bear on his work on behalf of our people. And so we have to encourage our people that if you want to be leaders and in leadership, study and master craft. Yes, master fields of people activity that we need in order to be able to build a nation.
African
We
War
need
College.
leaders who are exactly the African War College. We need leaders who are doctors and engineers, master educators, yeah, scientists. In religion and science lies our only hope to withstand the evils of modern materialism. The prophet
Marcus Messiah Garvey.
Why did he say religion and science? Because he understands the spiritual grounding that is needed and the scientific brilliance that needs to accompany it and balance it, and how those two forces complement each other in terms of the development of a nation.
I see. Yeah. And it brings me also to the blueprint for Black Power as well, because it's like at this point we've had so many, we want to keep doing the work they already did, and it's like no, that was already done.
Yes.
But we got to do it. Like, we actually have to do it. We have to use that information, because the sacrifices that were made in order for that to take place was for us to be able to build upon that. And, we've also already talked about the fear and all those other things. But I think this book also lays out beautifully the dynamics of power. And he describes in one portion of the book force as power, and also moves into psychic violence, right? Because the reason why we're able to be psychically controlled within the system, where, as Brother Omowale put it, like we're the ones appointing ourselves to be misleaders, is because the system has so sophisticatedly used the psychic violence and the social engineering to impose these ideas and deeply seed them within our consciousness, within our spirit, right? So our spirit is enslaved, but it's because the force was used as violence. So going back to talking about our Harriet Tubmans, our Nat Turners, and those who experienced the Ma'afa, like the entitlement that we have right now is disgusting, and it's insulting to our ancestors. And that's why the ancestors right now are so intolerant, because it's disrespectful. It's outright disrespectful, because we didn't go through that. We didn't shed any blood.
Yeah.
And but that force as violence is why the psychic violence exists. So there's still a compassion there, but within that realm, it's not really engaged in the emotional, like the emotional body and all of that. That's for us to deal with, as the people who are in a position to lead thoughts, to organize. It's important to make sure that the people are able to properly place their emotions, because that is one of the other critical ways that our strings are being pulled, right? The misleaders are using the emotions to move people and mislead people and it's not just the misleaders, but it's just the propaganda itself as well.
True indeed.
Yes.
And I'm hoping that we can give people, more of that prescriptive perspective as we wind to completion, on how to discern, how to really discern the real from the fake. I know we've been talking about it throughout the conversation, what it looks like, the anointing and the embodiment, but I'm hoping that each of you can share with us, how do we discern the real from the fake?
That's an excellent question, because it can be answered on many different levels, right? Because there are people who function as misleaders, but their misleadership comes forth because of their ignorance. You understand what I'm saying? There are people who have good hearts, who are inspired to act on behalf of their people, but kind of like monkey see, monkey do. It's like, this is what I got in my history books in public school. I saw Dr. King marching, I saw counter protests, I saw bus boycotts. So if I'm doing that, if I'm working with the Democratic Party, if I'm working with Al Sharpton and the national leaders of the civil rights movements, then I'm doing what I'm supposed to be doing. This is what the work looks like. When people be like, I'm on the front lines, like that's, I don't think that they are bad people, and I don't think that their intentions are fake. I just think that they are held captive by their ignorance and the bad politics that have been created for them, right? Brother Obi Igbuna refers to it as he has an excellent name. He calls it spectrum deprivation, right? The spectrum of Black political thought is this wide, but most people have only seen this much of it, right? So people are only being activated based upon what they have access to. And if what they have access to is trash, then, garbage in, garbage out. So people need a better political analysis. But like Brother Shaka Ross said at the beginning of the conversation, you know, it's hard to get it to them. We don't have the vehicles and the institutions and the mediums that the larger society has that serves to miseducate them and mislead them. We don't have those at our disposal we don't have those at our disposal like readily. So it's a more difficult um challenge. You know what I mean? Some of these people are benevolent Negroes. They mean well, but based upon the politics they've been given, they can only operate but within a certain set of parameters that do not serve to help us to get to our goals for liberation. So that's the challenge.
No, definitely. And to add to that, I think to answer the question very directly, look for organization. Yeah. If you don't see organization around a figurehead, 9 times out of 10, this is a questionable form of leadership.
True indeed.
If it's leadership at all, look for the body, look for the structure, look for the leadership structures that operate under the person who is at the helm. Yeah. And there are many forms of or organizations or forms of leadership that we might agree with their different ideologies or their politics or even their spiritual focus or whatever, but the organizational structure is sound, if that makes sense. It's viable, is sincere, is real. Yeah. And so the answer really is to ask the right questions.
Mm-hmm.
If you see somebody who wants to build an institution, nobody can build an institution by themselves. Look for the people around that person who are contributing equally as convicted to the institution that that person is building. Look for the board of directors. Look for the vice president, yeah, the chair, the treasurer. You know what I'm saying? Look for the secretary, yeah.
And if somebody tells you they're a messiah, walk away from them. run in the opposite direction.
Donations.
Yeah, it's these specific questions, and then we can get into, all right, what's the ideological focus? right? This is because I think that it's viable for organizations with varying different ideologies to be able to cross-pollinate and debate and sharpen each other and so on and so forth. But we can respect that you are a viable and legitimate form of leadership, as are we, and we will debate in that context.
Yeah.
That's a different level to, you ain't got nobody, you ain't got no institution, you ain't got no what's the word, collaboration. You know what I'm saying? And we have to be certain of the fact that liberation is a collective effort. And as African people, we don't operate as individuals, separate and distinct from the rest of our people on our own thing. So if it's not collective, then it's not leadership and it's not organization.
Yeah. It's like if somebody is promoting the black family to you and you say, well, where's your wife or where's your husband, and you don't see it, then that should be a red flag. Similarly, if somebody is promoting black liberation to you as sovereignty and you say, well, where's the organization, and it's not there, then okay, that should be a red flag. So
they should be seeking on the first point. They should at least be seeking, and there should be evidence of the seeking, because you may not have found the wife or the husband yet. I don't want
I get that.
I don't want to dismiss the single ones. You know what I mean?
You could be in between organization or in the process of building an organization. So I'll give you that. But at the end of the day, like, people come with a track record, so if I've had the opportunity to examine you over a decade, and over this decade, I haven't seen any organization or any program, like,
or any wife or husband.
Then it's like, okay, I don't know.
Be careful.
I think the two of you are being very kind. I really do appreciate the kindness. So,
diplomacy is an aspect of leadership. This is
because I remember I forget something you recently did, Brother Mo. I don't know if it was the war talk, but you quoted Kwame Ture, who I always remember saying, "Bad organization is better than no organization." And Kwame Ture does sit on the throne. He's the chairman of the board of ancestors for our work. However, right now, at the point that we're at, I don't have the tolerance for it. And I'm not tolerant of ignorance, even as an excuse. Like, I'm very much on that train of thought, like, we need to do what they did in IT, off with their heads and put them on stakes. Like, that's the point where I'm at with it. But I do agree that there are people who, are ignorant and, aren't aware, but at the same time, those people are also not displaying a willingness or a humble position to be able to learn, because there is plenty of information. It's not like these people who are out there organizing and who are, doing the Black Lives Matter work or Until Freedom or any of these spaces. It's not like they don't know. They've never heard about, some of these others that we're referencing right now. Like, they're not clueless, and they've taken on a certain mantle, and there's privileges that come with that. And I think they need to be accountable to that. I also feel like, to the point of ideology, that is something that's very important. But again, that's a whole nother conversation, because we're not all talking about the same thing. People are organizing for certain things, and there are benefits to all different forms of organization. We can look at, the silver lining within everything. But at this point where we are right now, we're at a critical juncture where we're at a crossroads. And there's just a lot of things that have to be left behind. And if we're able to leave those behind, we can really take on the truth in fullness and not have that other baggage.
No, I agree, sis. You brought the segment energy back to the conversation, and I appreciate it. It is definitely required at the moment, because we do have to contend with the fact that we do actually have open charlatanry and opportunism functioning, or let's say taking the space of genuine leadership. We do have people that are deliberately misdirecting the psychic and emotional energy of our people, and the collective force of our people's activity, especially in social media places, towards anti-Black and anti-African destructive intentionalities. Yeah. And when we see that, there is a need for chop off neck. Yeah. And you know what I'm saying? That there is that need right about now. It definitely exists. Yeah. And I think part of the problem is that too many people who have a sense of credibility sanction
Yes.
that kind of thing.
Yes.
For the sake of the notoriety, the exposure, and the platform
Yes.
that is provided by association.
Mm-hmm.
And at some point, well, I'm not calling names right about now, as you can tell.
You've already called them, brother.
Right? But at some point, we're gonna have to call names,
Yeah.
segment
Yeah.
energy, right? And chop off neck,
Mhm.
figuratively speaking, at least at this stage, right?
Yeah.
We're gonna have to do that. So I agree with you, my sister.
Yeah. And to the point of earlier, I really think it's also important, like, if you don't see the family, you don't see the organization, I also feel like that means I shouldn't see you. You need to be doing that. Like a lot of times people want to be on the forefront, be on the platform, and like coming back around to what I was saying earlier in the very beginning about the foundation of spiritual warriorship. My beloved sister Kepra Ma'ateteru and the foundation of the Spiritual Warrior Society developed out the self-initiation model. And that model is rooted in authenticity, but the divine spiral is a continuum of coming into awareness, going into healing, then unity, and then action. You come back in, you check, are you being authentic? Are you integrating? Then you become aware of more, you heal more, you unite, and you act. We're trying to skip steps. We become aware of something, and then you want to go into action and start doing something. Get on the forefront, take a mic, create a platform. But that's really that ego-driven side, because the healing process isn't being taken seriously, and that healing process is not a public process.
I agree, sis. I agree. But you've answered that question though, in the sense of the fact that we need structures and institutions for cultivating leadership. That is the point. What you demonstrated is a framework that keeps the self accountable, and an institution, a collective that is responsible for overseeing that accountability process. Yeah. And I think that Brother Omari talks about this in terms of race, manhood, and power. About manhood. Give the definition of manhood, bro.
Oh man, I got you. As manhood is a system of order, protection, and direction that is expressed through institutions that are capable of meeting the vital needs of people.
Right. Yeah. So that speaks to the fact that we need institutions and structures that are specifically designed to cultivate leadership, to define frameworks for viable leadership. Yeah, to develop the consciousness of what viable leadership is within the self and hold it accountable. And if it refuses to be held accountable, for chop off its neck. That is the point right there. So you've actually answered that by example through what you just said.
I see.
Yeah.
Yeah. The individualism is definitely going to be one of the great issues in regards to that, because a lot of these people who are misleading are coming from the perspective of their own individual gain. And that blinds them to the reality of what their actions are creating.
It's tough though, right? Because my perspective always comes back to this, is using the matrix as an analogy. People who are plugged into the matrix are just running their programming. They're not ours. Even if their skins, right, look like us, they're not us. They are running the program of the system. If they have not unplugged, once you've unplugged and you've come into our society, right, and you're
But nobody unplugged themselves.
no, that's
The whole
true.
ship Zion had to come, and they had to retrieve Neo.
That's true. That's true. You know what I mean? But I'm just saying this to say that, like, a lot of folks, in terms of navigating this reality, I just think that we are going to have to continue to sharpen our understanding of things, so that we aren't we aren't what's the word I'm looking for here? Like just outflanked, so to speak. You know what I mean? Because it's like I do believe that we have a very real power, but a lot of our people like are part of this, and I don't even know if we can call them our people if they are part of the system. So I don't know. I'm thinking out loud here. This is undigested thought that you're getting just because there's an uneasiness in me, and it's not, I don't care about chopping heads off. That's not what's giving me the sense of unease. It's about just the viability of that strategy, right? Because I feel like ultimately, like, would we be pulling dead weight? Like if you're on a plantation and you're trying to like overthrow the plantation system, like how much sense does it make to try to gain the people who are enjoying the plantation system, who don't want to overthrow it? Is like, can you even travel with them?
But no, that's why we saying cut their heads off and let them come back as answers and deal with their reality. They got to pay their debt for the society. But I
Yeah.
do think that the other part is like there's the discernment, because both and have to occur. Because when I think about it, like I came through the trenches. I was in it. Even the interview I did on your platform, Brother Omawali, just talking about like being in it and working at Manolo Blahnik and just like Sex and the City dream. Like it's very much like there are people who are in it because they have to go through it in order to become who they have to be in order to serve the collective.
True indeed.
So I think it's just the discernment. And I don't even think it's something we have to think of so much. It's just like what I was saying about the trust, like just allowing it to happen. Because when we try to like go in, like we don't have that overstanding, but Netter does, the divine does, and everything will eventually come forward.
True.
I had to draw for the book 2000 Seasons by Ikrama, because
Mhm.
that your exchange just then brought something to mind. I was trying to see if I could find it quickly, and I did. But there's a passage in the prologue, and if, by the way, if you ever get this book, my father advised me when I was a teenager reading this. He said to read the prologue like 3 times before going forward. I did that, and I get why he said it. But there's this section where he says, "But among the rushing multitude, remember well that the many rushing just because that is the present road, rushing not out of devotion, but because they are of a nature to take their internal order from the present season's surroundings. It is a waste of the seer's thought, the hearer's breath, a waste of the utterer's spirit to pour blame on such natures. Were the surrounding order the order of the way, these also would again be people of the way. It's their nature to flow along channels already deepened by recent flow. It is not their nature to wander, threatening their easy peace with thinking of channels already, if channels already found run true. Finders they are, not makers. Would you too, in pride, miming the white deathly people, would you also heap contempt on them? Do it directly then, and for your own satisfaction, undisguised. Only plead no disappointment that the ones you sow contempt, they too have not turned out to be makers. Finders they are, never did they deceive you with any promise of being creators. Yeah. And it's just
It's fire right there.
yeah, man. And this book is like that. Every paragraph is like, wow. So it's just that we have to understand what our mission is right now. Yeah. You seers, hearers, utterers, creators, how shall your vocation's utterance be heard? That's the challenge that we have. How is our utterances of our consciousness hearing the voices of our ancestors? We've got that in this time. We've received that vision from the prophets before us, and so we have to make that real to whatever extent we're supposed to make it real in this time. It's just our mission, it's just our burden, and we have to do that work without resentment for our people that are not on it right about now. We just have to own our mission and carry it. Yeah, I know that it will do its own work.
Yeah.
That captures my sentiment exactly. So I appreciate you bringing that forth.
Ashe, give thanks. And I feel that just covers this entire topic right here. I think each of us should lead in some capacity, even small, within just our families. Even bad leadership is better than no leadership. I may be off base, but I believe the lack of leadership is a bigger problem than misleadership. No one wants to lead. But that is a gross exaggeration, because a lot of people do want to lead. But when we're talking about, a lot of people don't want to be warriors. And I think that's an important note for us to complete on, is warriorship, right? As Mama Marimba said, as we open the way for the dialogue, right? Scrapping leadership for warriorship, because what we've been talking about through this entire conversation is a lot of people don't want to sacrifice. A lot of people don't want to die. A lot of people don't want to actually, what was the quote you said? You said, Chakra, they don't
we want to fight the white man, but we don't want to upset him.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Right. And we want to tiptoe. And what she was describing about warriorship and the importance of speaking the truth, and the truth is not going to be popular. That's the season that we've entered into. We've entered into the season where the leaders, the warriors, are rising, and they're not going to look, and they're not going to have the platform and all of these different things, these ideas that we may have been programmed into thinking. We may be expecting, like, you know, that some people are expecting to see Jesus come out of heaven, right? It's that illusion of what we're expecting to see. We have to understand the Messiah, the Christ consciousness is within, do battle within, and we're able to embody that energy and wield it forward. It will not be one, there will be many. There are many.
That's it.
Any final words on warriorship as we complete today's discussion?
I can't hear the word warriorship without thinking of Baba Mwalimu Mubaruti. And I think that he's doing significant work in codifying what it means to be a warrior. Whenever he speaks to me, he greets me, "Greetings, warrior."
Yeah.
Yeah. And so it comes back to what you were saying, my sister, in terms of creating the frameworks. Yeah. The framework that you outlined earlier was beautiful. And we need frameworks to guide our behavior and cultivate our character. That's what Rites of Passage is about. It provides you frameworks for what it means to be a man, woman, adult, elder. And you are abiding by those frameworks in the service of your community or nation.
Yeah.
And it's about defining the principles of warriorship.
Yeah.
And again, from that, once it's in an organized form, leadership will naturally evolve. From parent is a form of leadership. Wife, husband is a form of leadership, right? So all of these are functions within specific organizational units, but the warriorship gives us the governing principles for the function that we are that we are serving, the functional role that we are serving in at a particular moment.
Yeah. Respect. Yeah, I mean, for me, like the root word of warriorship, right, or the root word of warrior is war. So it's about understanding the nature of the war, right? The war is fought on different planes, physically, mentally, and spiritually, and you have to deal with all three. A lot of us like to have these flights into only dealing with the metaphysical. You know, we want to deal with the crystals. You know, we want to deal with the incense. We want to deal with the chakras, but we don't want to deal with the physical component of that war. And you have to be willing and ready to deal with all three. So cultivating warriors means that whatever it is that you do for your people, you also are a warrior as well. I don't care if you're a school teacher, you're a school teacher who's a warrior, or you're a warrior who happens to be a school teacher. You know, you're a cook, you're a warrior who happens to be a cook. You know, you're a hairdresser, you're a warrior who happens to be a hairdresser. Like that has to be the consciousness and the culture of a people who are being who are under siege. You know, the book that I'm writing, the title is Combat Ready Lifestyle, a grassroots handbook for rising the dead, right? Or reviving the dead, right? Combat ready, like as a lifestyle, it's a mindset, you know, it's a consciousness that you have to have. And it means that you have to be prepared to engage and battle um at all levels, you know what I mean? And you have to be willing to give and pay, you know, the ultimate price. You know what I mean? So there's a fear of death that a lot of us have been bred to have. And I think a big part of that is because the way that it's interesting. I'm writing about this right now and as we're speaking, but it's the way that time has been manipulated and our understanding of time and the narratives and stories that hold our mind captive have inculcated in us a fear of death, and that has to be disrupted and removed, right? The warrior, that is one of the things that you have to remove because that will be an obstacle to your path of attainment of supreme warriorship.
I say good thanks. I stand before everyone today because of that framework of spiritual warriorship. You know, as a spiritual warrior, it is through that process of self-initiation, which I understand is a divine cosmic inheritance and continuation. I understand that I'm part of the continuum. We are all part of the continuum, but having that framework in this life for me modeled the way that I could be accountable to myself and accountable to the collective, to my ancestors, and to the divine force that guides and connects us all. From that framework, I'm excited to say that that will be available on Tehuti Ma'at Academy. Will actually be open publicly as we're preparing that in this season to bring forward the self-initiation mission through Tehuti Ma'at Academy as a course to move through. One of the milestones is actually time travel. We're navigating eternity, our framework for converting people back into our time and out of the Roman time paradigm will also be woven within that work. So there are great things ahead in this season. We also have this coming Sunday exclusive for people in the Tehuti Ma'at Militia, as well as the African War College. We're having our Countering Chemical Warfare War Talk Raw Workshop, which is going to open the way for the season for us for Tehuti Ma'at Garden and Organic Food for the People. So if you're not part of the militia, I am going to put on the screen. If you want to get more information, you can obviously go to sudimat.org, which has been going along the bottom, but join the militia at the Kingdom rank. You'll be able to access exclusive gatherings and different content, any monthly contribution, but even to the point that the brother was making earlier about institutions and paying Shakara, which Shakara, we would absolutely love to curate a course on spirituality with you. But I don't know if you saw that comment, but the brother was saying like, oh, maybe we should pay him and we got to have someone work our children through.
No, I didn't see it, but yeah, I mean, you ain't gotta pay me, but I would love to, and I mean, yeah, I'm at your service, my sister.
Yeah, for sure. I feel like the work ahead is going to be great. In terms of how we cultivate and organize that, there is need for investment, right? The model that the African War College has, the militia has, I'm not sure how your organization functions and acquires funding, but just having those tiers and level makes it accessible for us all to be able to contribute in wherever our capacity is. We also are open to energy exchanges as well, which we're very serious about. Energy exchange. We're coming for our energy. If you ain't bringing the financial contribution, we absolutely other ways that you can exchange energy in order to join the militia as well, because it's really not about the money, but we do obviously need the money in order to operate and function.
That's right.
The other thing I want to share is that High Tops and Heels is also open on the agency side to producers, artists, designers, creatives, writers, educators, people who are interested in being able to be a part of the agency and able to take on different gigs and work. We're going to be focusing on our marketing campaign and collaborating and connecting with different Black-owned businesses and being able to provide these services for them. So if you are a writer, artist, a graphic designer, whatever it may be, and you want to be part of the agency network and get information about that as we come forward with that, you can send an email to connect@hightopsandheels.com. I mentioned earlier, we also have another live stream that will be coming up on Saturday, which is Think Beyond Spirituality, and we'll be focusing on that, talking about psychic hustlers, the new age possession, all the different dimensions that we're moving within that we may not be aware of. We're really going to get into the depths of a lot of the things that we discussed here today as well.
That's right.
And you can follow us on Instagram at THNK Ma'at. And you can also follow Brother Shakara. Can you go ahead and share any ways that people can connect with you? Anything that you want to share with the audience?
Shakara speaks on everything. I'm kind of realigning myself with my Sematawi instruction as well. So Basu Shakara, BASU Shakara. You can find me as well. So yeah, I look forward to connecting with brothers and sisters on that. I'm realigning with the aspect of my mission at the minute, so we give thanks for that process also.
That's exciting, and that's important to know in terms of ways that we can connect beyond what's been lifted. Give thanks.
That's it.
And Brother Omawali,
Yeah,
got your handle on there.
yeah, you can connect with me on YouTube, Facebook, Instagram. Everything is Omawali Africa. Website is www.omawaliafrica.com. So I'm not too hard to find.
All right. And like we always say, like, subscribe, hit the notification bell. We're going to have a lot of content, different artifacts coming forward in this season. We're really coming forward. Spring has sprung and we have great things ahead. Trust. And I'm going to just leave us in closing with our Tehuti Ma'at declaration, which is our commitment to true liberation will succeed in unity, oneness, and connection. Ashe. Thanks to the panelists again, and to everyone in the audience. Give thanks. Ashe.